You know, I need a. Okay. Beautiful. Mute everybody. That's it. Okay. Okay. Right. Lovely. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second installment. I just put on the recording, so this is being recorded. So anything which is said will be taken down in evidence against all of us.
It's that time of the year.
It's that time. Everything's taken down in evidence. Can you all hear me? Can you just put your hands up if you can? Good. That's good. If there are any problems with whether you can hear me or not, please do tell me ASAP. So that we can organise something else. We've got something else just in case. So I just want to tell you that I think. But this is called Sing a Song of Tishri. This is our second instalment. We've got the third instalment next Tuesday night. Actually, we're quite enjoying this because it lets us look at some of the aspects of Tishri, and I've enjoyed it myself, just looking into the machzor and delving into it. Now, we mentioned last week, there are parts of the tefillah, the nusach, that we said are Sinai. They come from Sinai. Does it mean actually they came from Sinai? Well, I don't think we can take that too seriously, but what it means to say is that they are so deeply ingrained in our psyche that the tunes go back so many hundreds of years. Indeed, we were able to identify some of the tunes, like, for example, Baruch Hu, Aleinu, the Kaddish before Musaf, Hamelech, and many other ones, the HaKohanim. These tunes that we can identify that they go back at least to the time of the Maharil. That's 700 years, at least. Today, we are going to explain some of the other Rosh Hashanah tefillot, and hopefully sing some of those songs. And Frank is next to me, and he's going to be speaking about that also, and we're going to be singing some of these songs together. We're going to start with Avinu Malkeinu. This formula, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, is used throughout our prayers between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Indeed, we recite it as well on fast days. But we do not say Avinu Malkeinu when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, as the first day does this year. So if you're coming to shul and expecting to hear Avinu Malkeinu, you're not going to hear it on the first day, but you will hear it on the second day. And the reason why we don't do it on Shabbat is because it mentions personal requests, which we do not do on Shabbat. The only time that we say Avinu Malkeinu on Shabbat is when Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat, and we would say it, I think, Tefillat Ne'ilah is the only time that we say it when Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat. I think we come to the realization at that time, this is it. This is the most important time. We ask for anything at that particular time. That's why we're using Avinu Malkeinu. You will note that our version of Avinu Malkeinu has 44 verses. But originally, when it was composed, they only had 4 verses, which is fascinating to know that. The story goes back, and you can trace it back to the Gemara in Ta'anit, page 15a. If you want to have a look, you can. Where 2 rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, were both praying for rain. There was a dire drought in Eretz Israel, and it was a matter of pikuach nefesh, an emergency. So Rabbi Eliezer, he starts with a traditional Amidah prayer with additional brachot. As the Gemara says, we should actually recite 24 brachot for that particular Amidah. And guess what happened? Nothing happened. There was no end to the drought. Then Rabbi Akiva got up and he started with the formula. And he said these words, Avinu Malkeinu ein lanu melech ela ata. Oh, our Father, our King, we only have you as our King. And Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, aseh lemancha, may do it for your sake, v'hoshi'enu, and save us. And then immediately rain began to fall. The Talmud discusses what made Rabbi Akiva's tefillah to be accepted and Rabbi Eliezer's not. Because the Gemara says Rabbi Akiva was over al midotav. What does that mean? He was more tolerant of others. That's really interesting. He was tolerant of others, and that made an effect up above. The rabbis ordained after that at a time of ta'aniyut, at the time of the fast days, and throughout the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, Avinu Malkeinu ought to be recited. But looking at these words, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Malkeinu is the motif of Rosh Hashanah, our King. In fact, we discussed it last week, about Hamelech, the King. That's where we're starting. That's where our tefillot really start from. Malchut, it's a recognition of Hashem as our King. But where does this idea of Avinu, our Father, come from? Note also that in Parashas Ki Titzei a few weeks ago, Moshe exhorts Bnei Yisrael, and it says to them, Banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. You are children to the Lord your God. We are the children. Bnei Yisrael are the children. Hashem is our Father. That's the first source of that. Note also the piyut in Rosh Hashanah Musaf. Let me just see if we can find it. Can we find it? Hayom Harat Olam. We're going to do this later. Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the birthday of the world. Then it says, Hayom Ya'amid B'Mifat. Today all creatures of the world stand in judgment. Kol Yitzurei Olamim. Im Kavanim Im Ka'avadim. Whether as children of God or as servants. Im Kavanim. If we are like children, Rachameinu Kavachim of Avanim. May you have mercy upon us like a father on his children, the Im Ka'avadim. But if we are like servants or slaves, our eyes look towards you. So you've got this idea, banim and avadim. We've got children and we've got servants. And we've got also the idea of a father, and we've also got the idea of king. So when we think of Av and Melech, we think of father and we think of king, we are thinking of two different aspects by which Hashem reveals himself to us. Like a king, we stand in awe and in judgment.
Oh, I've lost it.
Are you still here?
No, I've gone. Oh my God. Nobody said you had.
Oops, 1 second. I'm just going to remute. Hold on. Thank you. Just a little far away, so it takes me a few minutes to mute. There we go. Okay. Can you all hear me now? Yes? Okay. Sorry about that. Like a father, with that judgment comes that judgment comes Rahmaniyut, comes mercy and love. A king can always give, but doesn't necessarily want to give. A father wants to give. I'm a father, I know. We always want to give, but cannot always have the capability to give. So therefore the formula is Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Think about it. In Western Ashkenaz, the Nusach of Avinu Malkeinu has more Avinu Malkeinus than the Sephardim do. The Sephardim only have 38, we have actually 44. Did you know that? No. No? Well, this is an interesting one. We add 5 more, and it's because of persecution. Listen to this. These are the ones that we add. I would like to say, Avinu Malkeinu chamon aleinu v'aleinu v'tafeinu. Our Father, our King, take pity upon us and upon our children and our infants. Avinu Malkeinu, asay leman harugim Hashem kodecha. Our Father, our King, act for the sake of those who were murdered for your holy name. Avinu Malkeinu, asay leman tuvruchim al yechidecha. Our Father, our King, act for the sake of those who were slaughtered for your oneness. Our Father, our King, act for the sake of those who went into fire and water for the sanctification of your name. Our Father, our King, avenge before our eyes the spilled blood of your servants. This is all said in Ashkenaz. It's not said in Sepharad, and it's got to do with history. In Ashkenaz, it was specific that we had tremendous persecution, and that was the reason why this was added to our Avinu Malkeinu. Now, notice the last one. Our custom is to sing it and we sing it quite gung-ho, Avinu Malkeinu, which we're going to do in a moment. However, if you read it carefully, maybe we shouldn't be doing it in such a gung-ho manner. Because let me just say what it says. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu V'aneinu. Our Father, our King, be gracious with us and answer us. V'ein banu ma'asim. For we have no worthy deeds. Treat us with charity and kindness and save us. We're not talking about our own zechut. We don't have many merits. But for that reason, actually in Shulchan Aruch, it says, say this quietly. Say it quietly because you know that, yeah?
I've got to tell you, that those of us that still use the good old-fashioned Routledge, Mufsa,
Oh, that's the same.
the Routledge very clearly says the following verse is said silently.
Oh, there we go.
And I have to tell you, when I double shuffle it, I don't sing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. Oh, dear me.
Yes.
But you're not doing it, so we are
No,
doing it.
so we will.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do now...
Just before
Yes,
we
of
move on,
course.
do you mind if I pray for it?
Yeah, no.
Rabbi mentioned at the beginning, when we say it, that we say Avinu Malkeinu during the Aseret Shemei Teshuvah, and that we also say it on the other fast days as they crop up in the year, except for Tishri, I think.
We don't say Tisha B'Av because we don't ask our personal requests on Tisha B'Av.
But the other thing to note is that the whole prayer is actually adapted, so that during the Aseret Shemei Teshuvah, when the whole thing is that we should be inscribed into the book of life and we should be written down for our good things, the text is a series of the verses. Avinu Malkeinu Kotveinu B'Sefer Hayim, Avinu Malkeinu Kotveinu B'Sefer Gula. The word Kotveinu is used in 5 or 6 of the verses. When we say this during the rest of the year, the text actually changes, and we're using different words where we're saying, Zochrenu, you should remember us in the book of life, and remember us for our redemption, not here where it's the plea that you said, to actually inscribe us and to write us in that book.
I think that came in a little bit later. I think it came from the time of Rabbi Amram Gaon, who was from the 9th century. So that's quite late, Jewishly speaking. Which I think is quite funny. I just want to also say something else, something that you said. And that is, if you look through it very carefully, and I suggest with a lot of our tefillot, we need to actually look through it, not just at the time of our tefillot, but actually on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah, before Rosh Hashanah, just to review some of our tefillot. If you look at it very, very carefully, in the Amidah that we say every single day, we've got 3 brachot at the beginning, which are praises of God. We've got 3 brachot at the end, which are not praises, but they are thanks to Hashem. And then the middle part is actually bakoshot, so their requests. You will find all the requests that you find in the Amidah here, not in the same order, but it's there. So I think that's a really interesting thing on that.
Some are particularly obvious.
Yeah.
We have here, Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu Chus V'Rachem Aleinu.
Shema
Kabel Brachim V'Ratzon Et Tfilatenu.
Yeah.
Literally words taken from one inserted in the other.
I mean, I could do another one. Avinu Malkeinu Haren Keren Meshichecha. Raise high the pride of your anointed, which of course will go and fit into the Hatzmach Lanu Yeshua, the Karov, which makes salvation sprout for us soon, which is of course is speaking about Mashiach, which would fit in to Et Samach David Aftecha, which speaks about the seeing of David, your servant, bringing quickly in your day. I'll give you another one. Avinu Malkeinu Salach U'Machal L'Chol Avonotenu. Forgive and pardon all our sins. Funny, when the more you look at it, the more you see the depth and the beauty of our tefillah. Okay, shall we sing it?
Let's go for it.
Okay.
And please, if you're at home to get in the mood, join in, sing along. You won't be able to sing along next week in short, but come along then. But sing along with us now.
Yes.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Aneinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim, Aseh imanu, Tzedakah v'chem. Masay imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Nice stuff, thanks.
And you too. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go move on a little bit more. And
We're following through the service in chronological order. Avinu Malkeinu is effectively the end after the Shacharit Hamidah, before the Kaddish, and then we move on to Kriyat Torah. And in last week's Sedra, in Vayelech, the command is given for us all to write our own Sefer Torah, and it's referred to as Kitnu Liet Hashira Hazot. The Torah is referred to in the Torah as a song.
this song, Hazon.
And since this is singing a song for Tishri, I just felt that it would be right that we should be looking at the laning. We know that we blow the ram's horn and we read the Akedah, but how comes we've got these? How do we choose the laning for Rosh Hashanah? What was the rationale that met the various? And we've got the whole of the 5 books. How do we specifically pick these pieces? And well, that's enough here as well.
You know, it's a really interesting thing because, firstly, I mean, coming back to what you're saying, Hashira Hazot, I thought song is talking about from us, coming from us. It's tefillah, is our prayer rising up above. So it's milmata lamala, from below up above. Torah is something that we read. Okay, it might be Mike or it might be myself reading the Torah, or sometimes Frank, whoever might, or David, whoever might be reading the Torah. But actually, it's coming from God. It's Hashem's chachama. It's Hashem's wisdom. So it's going milmala lamata. It's going from above to below. But it's still shira. It's still looked on as shira and as song. So it's important to understand it. And we have to internalize some of those beautiful messages. And I think actually the Kriyat Torah is rather interesting because actually, if Rosh Hashanah is talking about the creation of the world, because it says Hayom Harat Olam, you would immediately think, let's go back to Bereshit at the very, very beginning and talk about Kriyat Olam, the creation of the world. Why on earth are we speaking about the beginning of our family? Why are we doing that? That's quite interesting. If you actually look at it, the first day, we speak about how Hashem visited Sarah and he had promised Sarah that they would have a child and how that child was born. And then the differentiation between Ishmael and Hagar, if you remember, and how Hagar went off into the wilderness and the Be'er and the well, and etc., etc. And then on the second day also, we read about the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac and the story of that binding. Now, I think it's really interesting. Now, the Gemara Rosh Hashanah actually says Hashem remembered 3 very important women in Jewish history on this particular day. Number 1, he remembered Sarah, he remembered Hannah, and all 3 people. Who's the third one? The third one, I think, is Rachel. Am I correct? He remembered these 3 people on this particular day. And so too, we remember how they prayed, and it reminds us of how Hashem listens and answers the cries of those who sincerely turn to Him. That's the reason why I think on Rosh Hashanah, which is called the Yom Teruah, the day of the blowing of the shofar, which has internalized that idea of crying and praying to Hashem, that we specifically mention this in our Torah learning, and there's a lot of different themes that come out also. The second day is Akedat Yitzchak. It's about the binding of Isaac, and it reminds us also there of the commitment, the Mesirat Nefesh of Abraham and of Yitzchak for Hashem to follow His word to the nth degree. And by the way, that's the reason why we take one of the reasons why we take the shofar, to remind us of how Yitzchak was almost sacrificed. According to some, he was actually sacrificed, but we're not going there. But he was almost sacrificed on the altar, and instead they offered up a sheep at that particular time, and that reminds us of that commitment that Abraham and Yitzchak had at that particular time. The Haftarah are also related to that. The Haftarah is of the first day is the Shirat Chana, the song of Chana, of how Chana also prays for to have a child, and of course she did have a child that would be dedicated to serving Hashem, and the name of that child was, of course, Samuel, and it also speaks specifically about her song, Shira Chana. And that song, by the way, in the Gemara, in the Talmud, it speaks about that song, and it says there's so many things that we can learn for our own tefillah from the tefillah and the song of Chana. That's a good thing to have for a sermon at one particular time. And then on the second day, the Haftarah comes from Jeremiah, and it's Hashem's promise to the Jewish people for redemption, of course. We do have a bracha of redemption, which is the last bracha of the Shofar, which we will come to later on. And it also has the Zichronot. It says, Haben Yakeli Ephraim, which we'll also come to, these beautiful ideas. So that's the Kriyat Torah. Thank you. So now we're going to talk about the shofar. We mentioned that Rosh Hashanah is called, in the Torah, two things. It's called Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. It's also called Yom Teruah, the day of the blowing of the shofar. Indeed, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says that if you have a shul with a shofar, or a shul with a shofar but without a minyan, and you have a shul without a shofar but with a minyan, you go to the shul without the minyan in order to hear the shofar. So it shows that the shofar is the most important thing on the day of Rosh Hashanah. It's interesting to note something I've spoken about actually. The Satya Gaon gives actually a whole lot of different reasons why we blow the shofar. Actually, let me just explain to you. The reason why we blow the shofar is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah from the Torah. But what does it symbolize? The Satya Gaon gives a whole lot of different ideas, and just off my head, it reminds us about the sheep, the Isle of Yitzchak, the sheep of Isaac. It reminds us also about the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. It reminds us also about when the camps moved in the desert, the shofar, the chatzotzot, the trumpets were sounded, etc., etc. And it also reminds us about the future redemption, the Kabbalah Shofar, Gadol, the Chayvutenu, and also Judgment Day. We're standing in front of Hashem, or the Shofar Gadol. So this is really integral part of our tefillah, but not only that, it's also brought in as part of our actual tefillah. So not only do we say the bracha as integral, just before Musaf, we say the brachot, but there's also certain parts in our on our Musaf when we actually stop and we actually blow that shofar to remind us, it becomes part of our tefillah, reaching up to Hashem. I always say, who's blowing the shofar? Okay, we know. In our show, it's me, whoever it happens to be, the Baal Tekeh. But who is actually blowing the shofar? Who does it represent? Is it Hashem calling to the neshama, to the soul of every single person? Or is it us calling up the neshamot, calling up to Hashem? And I think the answer is, it's a bit of both. We go first?
Yeah. If we look at Musaf,
yes,
and you just alluded to blowing the shofar in Musaf, because it separates different sections.
Yeah. So let me just go through back to really something I mentioned earlier. You have an Amida. Normally on a Yom Tov Amida, the standing prayer, Shemona Esrei, whatever you want to call it. Actually, it's not really Shemona Esrei because Shemona Esrei is 18. But the normal Shabbat Amida or Yom Tov Amida, what you have is you have 3 brachot at the beginning, which are praises of Hashem. Then you have 3 brachot at the end, which are thanksgiving of Hashem. And then you have what we call Kedushat Hayom, a bracha on the day. So, for example, in the case of Shabbat, it's a nice long little bracha. It starts with Tikkun Shabbat, and it ends up with the words Baruch atah Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord, who sanctifies the Shabbat. Or if it was a Chag, you say Mekadesh Israel v'Hazmanim. Blessed are you, O Lord, who sanctifies Israel and the times, and the particular Moed, the particular time that we're in. But actually, if you look at Rosh Hashanah, it's completely different. Remember, Rosh Hashanah is a very special time. It's all about Malchut. It's all about kingship. Remember what we said. It's about making him the king. Now, if you look at it, you'll see there's actually not just one bracha in the middle, but there's 3 brachot, meaning that there are 9 brachot. There's no other service that actually has 9 brachot. So we've got 3 at the beginning, 3 at the end. The 3 at the beginning really don't change. Well, we put a little additions. And the 3 at the end really don't change. But the 3 in the middle are very, very different. And I'd like to just talk about them. Those 3 comprise something called Malchiot verses which are talking about kingship. Second one is Zichroniot. Zichroniot are remembrance verses. And then we've got Shofriot verses. Shofriot verses, I don't need to translate it, but verses of blowing the shofar, which is quite interesting. So what is this all about? I would like to say, sometimes in our prayer, sometimes in our prayer creeps in articles of faith. I'll give you a prime example. When we daven Shacharis every single day, or Maariv, we say the Shema. The Shema is not a prayer. People think the Shema is a prayer, but it's not. Actually, Shema is talking about our articles of faith, of faith. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is all is one. And then you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And it talks about the different mitzvot that we fulfill to get closer to Hashem. That's the first paragraph. The second one is the Hayat im Shama Tishma'u. If you listen to the commandments, this and that and the other will happen. We'll have peace in the land, etc. And the last one, Vayom Hashem, talking about the mitzvah of tzitzit and also about revelation, because it talks about I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So Rosh Hashanah, therefore, in these 3 brachot, we have to understand and we internalize these 3 concepts. Malchut is Hashem is the king of the entire universe. It's actually parallel the first paragraph of the Shema. We need to become more God-centric and focus our lives towards him. Then it comes to Zichronot. These are the remembrance verses. We go back through Jewish history where God has intervened and how Hashem has remembered his people at different times. So we recognize that Hashem sees everything and he hears all. And that corresponds to the second paragraph of the Shema, the Hayat and Shema. And finally we come into Shofriot. Hashem appears to his people with the shofar at Mount Sinai. But in the future, Hashem will appear to his people with love. Even though that we don't blow the shofar on the first day, it's interesting to note we still say Hayom Harav Olam actually as part of that. Okay, so I think I've just explained the 3 parts of that prayer, and that's the reason why Rosh Hashanah Musaf, I think, is the longest Musaf of the year. It is a few days. Am I correct? Yes, absolutely. So, can we sing a few of the things? Let's have a look at the Chol Ma'aminim. This is part of the of this, and yes, the Chol Ma'aminim. Interesting. The author of this is a person called Yanai. Yanai was a very early Python poet, and he authored this in the 6th century. Wow! actually, you find this going back many, many years in Machzorim. Very early manuscripts from the Cairo Geniza have been found since before Ma'aminim. So it's really quite an old piyut. But we always get it wrong because we call it before Ma'aminim. But actually, it goes the other way. It starts with Habochen or Bodek Ginzei Nistarot. V'chol Ma'aminim Shehu Bochen Kalayot. Now it's really interesting. Who tests and examines hidden archives, all believe that he examines thought. That actually goes together because those are the two bits go together, right? So it actually should start, Habochen or Bodek Ginzei Nistarot. That's not how we do it. The way all communities do it is we start with a Choma Aminim, and then we go to the next stanza, Hagol, which is really quite interesting. And I just thought that was interesting. But Frank, you take over and sing a few parts of it.
And again, what we actually have then is another example of the actual half of the verse that starts with the Choma Aminim running through again in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
As is common to we have Shehu, El, and Munah with the Aleph. Bochen is the base, Goel, Gimel, Dayan, Dalet, and so forth.
But it's interesting.
This happens so often.
It's interesting. It's a double alphabet crossing. A double alphabet crossing. So it's actually 44 verses in all, right? Because it's double alphabet. So you've got Habochen with Bochen goes together there. Goel and Goel.
We have the Aleph as well. It's questionable whether the Ha'oches B'yad Midat Mishpat actually goes with the previous paragraph, or is actually the start of this one?
I think it does. I think it's a bit of both, because we're talking about mishpat, justice, and then it goes to okay. It's very interesting, and then
you've got the aleph. You've got
the aleph, before my meaning. So actually, the way we do it, it's completely wrong, but everybody does it.
Across the board.
It's across the board.
But hopefully, this will again whet the appetite and bring Yom Tov coming forward. I'm going to skip through 3 sections of this and introduce in what we're going to sing now, 3 different tunes. But as I say, it's not going to flow completely in terms of the verses.
People have a machzor at home.
If anyone has a machzor, certainly in the Routledge, I'm on page 149.
And page 490 in the art scroll.
V'chol, 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 ma'aminim shehu. V'chol, 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 ma'aminim shehu. Goel chazak, Adan yichidi levoei olam. V'chol ma'aminim, ma'aminim, ma'aminim shehu. V'chol ma'aminim, ma'aminim shehu. V'chol, v'chol, v'chol ma'aminim shehu levado. Hamamlik malakim lo hamalucha v'chol ma'aminim shehu melech olam ha'oeg b'chasdo kol dor v'chol ma'aminim shehu notzer chased hasover u'malim ayin mesorerim v'chol ma'aminim shehu soleach sela ha'elyon beino v'chol ma'aminim shehu oneh lakash ha'otzeach shal dovkei b'tshuvah v'chol ma'aminim shehu b'tuchai סופר הרשע וחפץ ביצעקו וכל מאמינים שהוא צדיק וישר הקצר בזעם ומריח וכל מאמינים שהוא וכל מאמינים שהוא.
Okay, what we did do was.
Also move on and talk about mindful at a time.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the Tishri or not? No, let's move on.
Okay, Zichronot, yes.
Yeah.
And let's go on to Zichronot. And
Which we missed out, we can do on Friday night.
yes, we can definitely do.
Well, you've got to join us on Friday night for preparation for the Rosh Hashanah.
I'm on page 512 in the article. And what page are you on?
I'm coming up now to 159, which we'll see, but we're starting on page 158. Are we going to sing? We're going to sing Zacharti Loch?
Yes, definitely. Right. Zacharti Loch. This is talking about how Hashem remembers his people, Israel.
Zacharti Loch, Chesed Noraim, Ahavat Kanolotayich, Lechteich Acharei B'midbar, Be'eretz lo zeruah, ונאמר, וזכרתי אני את בריתי אותך בימי נעורייך, והקימותי לך ברית עולם. ונאמר, הבן יקיר לי, אפרים, אם אלן שעשועים, אם ידעך רבים בו, זכור אזכרנו עוד, על כן המור מעלו, רחמנו
these words beautiful. And through your servants, the prophets, the following is written. Go and proclaim in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, so said Hashem, I remember for your sake the kindness of your youth, the love of your bridal days, how you followed me in the wilderness in an unsown land. And it is said, but I remember my covenant with you of the days of your youth, and I will establish for you an everlasting covenant. And it is said, is Ephraim my most precious son, or a delightful child, that whenever I speak of him, I remember him more and more? Therefore my inner self yearns for him. I will surely take pity on him. These are the words of Hashem. That comes part of the Zichronot, when Hashem remembers all his brit, his covenant with the Bnei Israel, with the Jewish people.
If we can move on, if you're happy, to the final section where we talk about the shofarot.
Okay.
And we had this beautiful ending, which starts with Elokeinu v'Elokei Avotenu Tekar b'shofar gadol l'chayotenu. And it's a beautiful piece of music, but I think that if we just look at the text for a moment, this piece epitomizes how the music interprets the tefillah. Because if we look at the very beginning, the opening words of this piece, which we'll see in a moment, Tekar b'shofar gadol l'chayotenu. Sound the great trumpet for our freedom. It's a massive big fanfare and a blast. And it carries on with these beautiful words, V'havienu l'tzion ilcha barina, L'Yerushalayim beit mikdashcha b'simchat olam. Lead us in triumph into Zion, your city, into Jerusalem, the place of your sanctuary, with everlasting joy. And if you imagine being led through to V'havienu l'tzion, to Zion, approaching Jerusalem, what better way than the music picks up the tune of Hatikvah? It picks up the glorious sound of Hatikvah, that sound that sends that chill down our spine whenever we hear Hatikvah, but also Hatikvah hope. And this is the hope for all of us for the future. And to my mind, the music here just brings these words to life. It's almost the last thing in Musaf. And if ever there's anything worth waiting for, I think it's
I love this one. I love this one.
So with your, I mean, it's quite a long piece. Maybe we won't have to do the whole thing.
Well, I like the last part, but I'd like to start it off and let's see how we go.
Okay.
You know, we can go beyond from the
Yeah.
so go
Yeah.
jump
Okay.
to go on. And wait. We're on page 161 in the Routledge, page 518 in the Art Scroll, if you're following us. Okay.
Tekar, tekar, b'shofar gadol, l'chirteinu, v'sanes, v'kametz, galyateinu, v'karei b'zoreinu, mi ben hagoyim, unefot obteinu kanes, mi arketei haaretz, v'karei b'zoreinu, mi ben hagoyim, unefot obteinu kanes, mi arketei haaretz, v'havienu l'tzion ircha, l'tzion ircha, berina, v'Yerushalayim beit mikdashcha, v'simchat olam, v'havienu לציון עירך, לציון עירך בנינה, ולירושלים בית מקדשך בשמחת עולם. וביום שמחתכם ובמועדיכם ובראשי חודשיכם ותקעתם בחצוצרות עלותיכם ועל זבחי שלמיכם, והיו לכם לזיכרון לפני אלוקיכם. אני השם אלוקיכם.
No, I remember doing this when I was a little boy in Beehive Lane Shul. In the Odeon Cinema, there were 3,700 people there. The place was packed. And I did a little solo here. And this was like the solo of the year. 1 second, it was Shomea, right? Shomea,
Kol shofar umazin teruah ve'ein nomelach shomea kol teruat amo Yisrael. 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 Barachamim. It's just the words are alive as you sing.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to read the words. Read the words. Go over it. Revise it. It's really beautiful. Right. What comes next? Okay, so this year, it's rather interesting that this year it is Shabbat for the first day. So it's important to know that even though that it is Yom Tov and it's Rosh Hashanah and it's the beginning of a new year, the anniversary of creation and all this type of thing, we must never forget Shabbat. Indeed, we do not blow the shofar when Shabbat falls on Rosh Hashanah, or the other way around, when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. But we still add over Yom HaShabbat and Yismachu b'malchut Pacha, and we do have little add-ons right through the Tefillah, just as a reminder that it is Shabbat. Mekadesh HaShabbat, 1 second, I think it's Mekadesh, Melech HaKol Haaretz, Mekadesh HaShabbat, Yisrael, the Yom HaZikaron. So Shabbat is not forgotten there. It's really important, even to recognize that it's one of our high holy days, that it's still Shabbat. Always important. So,
No pressure on the chassan for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi. But we spoke last week about the importance of having the tunes and recognizing the tunes to know where you are. And certainly when I've been davening, whether it's Rosh Hashanah, whether it's Yom Kippur, or even if it's the Shalosh Regalim, that's not even, it's the wrong way to difference them. But in the lead up to this, we're in the Rosh Hashanah melody, so we're singing straight into the Shabbat, the thing we hear every other week. And that's a mimoto karaka.
So we've got that little, we go into, what you're trying to say is that we sort of like change from the Rosh Hashanah tune, the High Holiday tune, into the Shabbat. And you go, oh, I just hope I get it right.
No pressure.
If not, Frank's going to get me. Uh-oh. But it's okay. He can't throttle me. He can't throttle me. He's got to keep his 2 meter distance. Okay, let's go further. You know, we won't be blowing the shofar. We won't be blowing the shofar this year, as I mentioned on the first day. However, after each one of the brachot, of those 3 middle brachot of Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofriot, we do say Hayom Harat Olam. And it's actually, I mentioned that earlier because these beautiful words, actually, I haven't actually gone into this because, you know, I like to go into tefillah to find out where each one part of our tefillah comes from. I think it must be very old because it's there. I don't know of a machzor that doesn't have Hayom Harat Olam in it. Now you can find this on page 520 in the article and on page 162 of the Rabbi. And you'll take out the little blue book. It's going to help us for the tune.
The piece of music is actually written by a composer, written a lot of pieces for us, by Mombach.
Mombach,
It's
yes.
come right through the ages.
I've got actually an original Mombach book, composer book at home. I might show it to you sometime. Okay. There we go.
Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Ya'amid B'mishpat, Kol Yitzurei Olamim, Im Gavanim, Im Ka'avadim, Im Gavanim Rachameinu Kerachem, Aval Banim, Ve'im Ka'avadim, Eineinu Lacha Teluyot, Ad Shetachanenu V'totzicha Mishpatzenu, Hayom Kadosh.
You know, I know what you're about to point out to me. We mentioned this earlier, and we're talking about father and son, and we're also talking about kavanim, like children, or like ka'avadim. When it comes to im ka'avadim, notice we went down the im ka'avadim, which is this idea of justice. You know, if we are standing there like servants, our eyes look towards you. Beautiful. The words and the composition is really beautiful and expresses the actual words. So very beautiful, very beautiful. We're going to move on now to actually the end of, well, just near the end of the Musaf. And that is Hayom. Hayom Ta'amseinu. Now, it's quite interesting. Hayom Ta'amseinu. Today, may you strengthen us. Today, may you bless us. Today, maybe God exalt us. It's all part of brachot. We're asking brachot, blessings from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Interesting, we only have 7 brachot. I think on Yom Kippur we have 9, I think so.
Yeah.
But on Rosh Hashanah we only have 7. And notice Hayom Ta'amseinu, Hayom Tavarcheinu, Hayom Tegadleinu. And that's Aleph Bet Gimel. Sorry, we've got 8. We've got 8. Aleph Bet Gimel Dalet. But then it goes Hayom Tishma Shabbatenu. It goes Taf Taf Taf. So we've jumped from the Dalet all the way to the Taf. Have you noticed that?
No, it's Taf all the way through. It's the second letter.
Yeah, but sorry, it's a Shin.
The Dalet was from Chaf.
No, it's actually it's Taf. It's Taf. Shin and Taf. Yeah, no, it is. Believe me.
Sorry.
Believe me. So I have no. If you look at the back of the Quran.
Excuse me.
That's a terrible mistake. If you look at the back of the Koran, you look at the back over there. Actually, it has the full alphabet. It goes to alphabet. Actually, the original went to the alphabet, and that was from the Seder of Rabbi Abraham Gaon, the Siddur of Rabbi Abraham Gaon, going back to the 9th century. I just wanted to share that with you. You actually have it, and the Sephardim actually go through the whole lot. But I think when we come to the end of the service, the last thing we want to go through is the tune that we do. It's a beautiful tune, and it does go over a little bit. So I think it's quite right that we come down to 8 brachot to 7 or 8.
Well, we do the first 3 in the last one.
Yes.
So this is. Very end, last bit of Musaf before the Ark is opened, the Kohanim have just spoken, and this is how we are finishing off with, again, our plea, our prayer, that for today such and such will be done, that we're going to be blessed, that we'll be uplifted, and that Hashem will visit us for good, for a happy life.
Yeah, I mean, interesting, it's normally the Kohanim who have just blessed us, who we ask to open up the Ark Kodesh. This year, don't ask. We'll talk about that. Don't worry, Philip and Martin. I know what you're doing. We'll talk about it. Okay. Yeah. Ayom, 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 te'ametzenu. Ayom, 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 tevarachenu. Ayom, 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 tegadleinu. Ayom, 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 tekabel berachamim uratzon, tekabel berachamim uratzon, et tefilateinu. Ayom, 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 titmachenu b'mitzidkecho. Very, very good. Thank you, Frank. I went a bit off there, but there's another thing. Okay. Right. Last thing, the next thing we do is normally after that we've done a few brachot after that, and then Oseh HaShalom and Kaddish. And that last Kaddish is a resounding Kaddish. It's Kaddish, and Frank, want to leave this off? I love this Kaddish. I've been to Chabad. Chabad, we go wild with this Kaddish. Everybody goes wild. Everywhere you go. I don't think they do it amongst the Sephardim, but where we go, everywhere in Anglo Jewry, it's always done. And America, when I was in America, and Israel, everywhere.
And again, we made the point last week that the preparation, the build-up for Yomim Noraim is in the month of Elul. And of course, this is the tune that's used for this Kaddish Kabbalah is the tune that concludes the very first Selichot service in Ashkenaz circles as well.
Yeah.
So those of you that either tuned in and saw the Shabbaton film last Motzei Shabbat or watched the live service from Edgware, you would have heard this Kaddish. I don't know that there is any other Kaddish to Kabbalah.
Right. Let's go.
Yikadash Shemei Rabba
Amen.
Ve'alma Dirakirte Ve'yamlik Malchute Ve'chayekon U'yom Echon U'chayekon Beit Yisrael V'ala Mitzvan Karib Ve'yimaru Baruch Amen. Yehesh Me'rabam Le'barach La'olam Olamei Almaya Yitbarach Yitbarach Yishtamach Me'yitpar Me'yitramam Ve'yitnasei, ve'yitadar, ve'yitaleh, ve'yitalal, Shemei de'kudesha, Shemei de'kudesha, Brithu, la'ela, mikol bilchata, l'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, yamiram me'alma, Tushbechata, Menemata, Amiram be'alma, be'imru amen. Zikabel telot hanuvau dechol Yisrael, Kodam amuhan dihishmaya, be'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shalom Rabba, min shemayim chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom imramav. Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Enjoyed that.
That concludes. Musa?
At 9:05. Do we have any? Thank you. Do we have any questions? Please unmute yourself if you want to ask a question to either Frank or myself, or both of us, or no questions at all. Whatever you want to do. Anybody?
Yeah, I would like to know how. I would like to know how two voices can sound like an entire choir.
Well done, Clemmy.
That's hilarious. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clemmy. Thank you. We try our best. By the way, we didn't practice. We just stand up here and do it.
I do not believe you for 1 minute.
Oh, you have to.
This is not the time of year for telling lies.
It's not a fib.
I've got to say, Rabbi and Frank, that was so lovely, and because none of us can sing, unfortunately, this year, we can't with masks and everything. You're going to have to do it, both of you, and sing on behalf of all of us, and I'm sure we'll appreciate it. We will. Just listening to you.
I'll tell you, Martin, we've got a problem because we want to sing and we want to do the songs that we normally do every single year. And we've got a problem because we've got to make sure that nobody joins in. Or you can hum, but you can't sing.
And we've only got an hour and a half to do it.
And we've only got an hour and a half to do it.
And also, it's very, very difficult to sing in a mask.
Yeah,
if we're wearing masks, very, very difficult.
Well, the Chazon doesn't have to wear a mask.
No, exactly.
So, but Martin, the only problem that we have is if we find that we'll probably have to say before we start, don't sing. That's terrible. We have to say it, or we've got to have it in the heart. We have to sing in the heart. So I think that's the only thing that we can do. It's very difficult for us. We're quite musical.
I know.
As a people, we're quite musical, and we got this.
But what you'll have this year is you'll have all our attention. So we'll be concentrating on your singing. I was just going to say something. When you were talking about Avinu Malkeinu before, in the earlier part of this talk, our Father, our King, there is something before that which actually specifies about Hashem and kingship, and that he is the king, and that is Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Limloch La'olam Voed, which is the Lord is king, the Lord was king, and the Lord shall forever be king.
Yeah, funny enough, you're talking about in Shacharit. That's going to be recited by David. It's quite interesting that you mentioned that. Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimalach La'olam Voed. That's a tune that David does. David, are you with us?
No, he's not
with us today. Okay. I've got different tunes that I use for this, but it is very beautiful. Very, very beautiful, Martin. Thank you for that. Thank you.
But Martin, I think one of the things you've done is you've highlighted the fact that the point that the Rabbi mentioned before is if this year, I make a point that whereas we have normally it's Shiru Lashem, we're singing to God. And this year, perhaps the theme of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is going to be very much Shema Kolenu. It's listen to our voices. And that's going to be Rabbi, me, it's going to be David. And if you're just, not if you're sitting there listening, but when you're sitting listening, you've got a chance to look at the words. Because really, those words, as you've identified, you picked up some, and we've just touched the tip of the surface of it tonight. The words are just so beautiful. And look at some of the things, they're just so heartfelt. And that really is, I think, what we've all got to gain out of this, what's going to be a very strange Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yes,
I mean, the interesting thing, Frank, is that we're giving 3 different talks about this. Next week it will be about Yom Kippur, and I hope you will all join us. But it is just the tip of the iceberg. We've hardly hit any of the Shacharit songs. Just going through it, there's so much, and it's so deep. Some of the words just go into it. You can just delve into it this year. And by the way, if you're at home, do that. If you're not coming out, just spend your time and daven, with all your heart, and give it all your heart and your soul. And take different machazorim that you like. The Koren is nice. The Routledge, if you love it. If you either love it or hate it, but that's another thing. The Art Scroll, it's beautiful also. Each machzor has its own contribution. I don't necessarily like the English in the Art Scroll. I prefer the Koren for the English. Routledge has a tradition. Each one for its own, but take them. Whatever does it for you, and I think delve into it. Take your time to delve into it. I think that's really important. Thank you, Martin, for your thoughts. Anybody else? Anybody else? I think we've answered all the questions.
I'm going to put this back.
Next Tuesday? No, we'll see that one before then, but next Tuesday is...
we'll
look at Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur.
Yeah, next Tuesday, please God, we'll be looking at Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur, some of our tunes that we use for the vidui. I think that's really important, and Ki Anu Amecha, and just some of those, and a bit of the Avodah, and just having a look at some of those tunes that really are unique to this time of the year, and just enjoy them. I think, to me, these just, it brings me home. Any synagogue you go to throughout the world, you have these beautiful nigunim, and it really, connects me. For me, that's my what I say.
Absolutely right. And I think that the point is we talk about these as being the days of war, but it is a Yom Tov. and we've just sung Uva Yom Simchatchem, and it's a time to be happy and to rejoice as well. And I think that we should be happy, we should be rejoicing, and that's what we need to try and do.
And I think this year more than ever, we have to find that inner simcha, that inner joy. You know, you look out there, what's going on in the world around us, and it ain't too good, you know, whatever way you look at it. But, you know, we have to have our inner happiness and our inner joy, which also affects the people who are around us, and share that joy. And that joy of the simcha of Rosh Hashanah, and indeed Yom Kippur. The Mishnah in Tanit says, very beautiful thing. It says, there was no greater joy in Israel than on Yom Kippur. No greater joy. And you think Yom Kippur, it's sad, you're sitting there, you're fasting, and it's joy. It's an inner joy. And I think that's really important to recognize. And definitely that applies to Rosh Hashanah, of Yom Simchat Chen. Beautiful. Anybody else like to add anything?
Can I come in here?
Yes, Robert. Yes, Robert. You're the expert. You're the real expert.
We're missing you, Robert.
We're missing you, Robert. We need you. We need to come back.
I want to tell you that the idea of you presenting these melodies to us all is really of huge value, and I congratulate you on the thought and putting it together, because these traditional melodies bring us straight into the mood of the Yom Tovim. And in many places of the world, if you walk into an Orthodox shul, these are the melodies that unite us as a people. And it's really great that you've done it. I know that when I hear it brings one straight into the mood of the Yomim Noraim, but only if you know that melody. If that's the first time you've ever heard it, it's just another series of notes. But when that's been the tradition that you've heard every year on the Yomim Noraim, and you know that if you go to a shul in America, in France, in Switzerland, Australia, that you're likely to hear that same melody, and that's such a strong unifying process that we should all enjoy and cherish. And I thank you so much for presenting this evening.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert, for that. Thank you.
That takes me back to my childhood. That melody, Robert. It's really, it just brings it all out into me. Very, very.
Thank you, Howard.
That's I was making. It's a universal melody.
Very awe-inspiring. I just think my mum and my dad, and it just brings everything back. It's wonderful.
Yeah, for me too. And for Frank. Forest Gate, where you're Forest Gate, Beehive Lane. Beehive Lane, that was a big...
Poets Road.
Sorry?
Poets Road.
Oh, Poets Road, yeah. Well, Alshall, Beehive Lane, that was the Odeon Cinema. It was massive.
Then we moved to Wembley, went to Wembley Town Hall after that. Today, I don't think they get that crowd. Maybe they'll be happy this year to have 50 people there. But in my days, whoa, there were thousands of people came to shore. Whoa, that was big. That was big. That was the chief, you know, for that job for Yom Tov. Yeah, I remember it. No. Anybody else want to say anything?
Can I say, Rabbi Black and Frank, thank you so much. It was beautiful. Enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, yes.
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's absolutely fantastic to be able to join you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Lovely to have you from Bournemouth.
Lovely joining you. It's absolutely fantastic joining you. It's been the most wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Such wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. I'm wishing you all chance.
Thank you, Shana.
Everybody.
I'm joining you from Manchester as well. Thank you very much.
That's very nice. And I see you, Elaine. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Rabbi. And Frank. It's wonderful.
Thank you very much. It was so marvellous.
Yeah, it's very special.
Come next week, Tuesday, and by the way, I'll see you at our Erev Rosh Hashanah. Zoom into Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, no.
Okay, we'll do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you much, Frank. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much from Carmel and David.
Oh,
Really
yes.
enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, myself. John Otto, to you all.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan.
A happy New Year. Lovely to see you all. Lovely. Keep well.
Yeah. Keep well.
Lovely. That's very good. Oh, we've got 3 comments.
That's finished, isn't it?
Good
night.
Bye.
Good night, Senator.
Jonathan, all the best, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you. Shana Tova to everybody. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, lovely to see you.